So good evening and welcome to our fourth public input workshop in our process to update the Sonoma County Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP. Thank you for joining us tonight and contributing your time to help prepare where you live for wildfire. And if we could make sure everybody's muted, Amanda and Kaylin, that would be great. Tonight, we're here to listen to your community input regarding preparing for wildfire in Sonoma County's 5th Supervisorial District. Tonight's process will work best from your computer versus a phone, so if you're able to, please join us via your computer. We're recording tonight's meeting and it will be available soon via the Permit Sonoma YouTube channel, where it will also have closed captioning. We'll also share our CWP hub site link tonight where you can find everything. My name is Tracy Cattleman. I'll be facilitating tonight's meeting on behalf of Permit Sonoma and Digital Mapping Solutions. In addition to facilitating, I'm a registered professional forester, and I've been working in community wildfire preparedness in North Coastal California for over 20 years. Really happy to be here with y'all tonight as we move our community engagement process into the virtual world. I'm joined tonight by Caroline Stafford of Permit Sonoma, Esther Mandino of Digital Mapping Solutions, Roberta McIntyre and Kaylin Notch with Fire Safe Sonoma, and my colleague Amanda Simpson at Evergreen Forestry, as well as Carol Rice, Barbara Camacho, and Hannah Lopez from the Contra Costa RCD. Next slide. So first, we're going to start with a few Zoom basics. So please be sure you're muted and to turn off your video. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, you can send direct chat messages to our team via the chat icon on your toolbar, which is likely on the bottom of your screen in the middle. If you need subtitles, you can enable live transcription on the bottom right of your screen by clicking on the live transcript icon, then select Show Subtitle. Bienvenidos a nuestro vecino quienes prefieren hablar en español. Perdona, pero no tenemos interpretación hoy. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor, mándenos un mensaje por chat. Next slide. So Zoom provides a couple of options for your audio. If you don't have a great internet connection or having a hard time hearing us, click on the up arrow next to the audio icon, which is below the microphone at the bottom left of your screen. From there, you can choose to switch to phone audio and follow the instructions to link your audio and video or computer connection. If you have any other questions or issues using Zoom, please send Kaylin a message in the chat. Next slide. So tonight's meeting is designed to encourage your input to the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP process. We want to hear from you, as this is a community wildfire protection plan. So we have two purposes tonight. First, we're offering you the opportunity to learn from us as local experts about wildfire risks and what you can do to better prepare yourselves as individuals and as communities. And second, we're providing an opportunity for you to identify community values, risks and hazards, and potential projects for the CWPP update. Next slide. In terms of our outcomes, or what we expect us all to leave this meeting with tonight, we will provide to you how you as residents can continue to provide input into the CWPP update process throughout the summer through the end of August, how to use the online hub site to download information and provide input throughout this process, best practices regarding home hardening and defensible space, and information on local fire protection capabilities and needs. Next slide. We would like to learn from you tonight your local knowledge and concerns regarding wildfire risks and hazards in your communities where you live, priority community values at risk to be protected from wildfire where you live, and potential priority projects to prepare your neighborhoods and communities in the face of upcoming wildfires. Next slide. So finally, this is our agenda for tonight. We're starting with a brief welcome and introductions, including your County Supervisor Hopkins, who will be coming up next. We'll then provide a series of short presentations about the CWPP and what we can all do to prepare for wildfire right now, as before fire season, which is coming on us very quickly this year. Then we'll be moving into breakout rooms by geographical planning divisions. We'll go through an interactive process with you to identify your priority values and assets at risk to wildfire, wildfire risks and hazards, and potential projects to address those risks and hazards. Please be respectful of your neighbors in this process. Finally, we'll come back together and hear from each of the breakout rooms and close by 7:30. We will stick around another half hour after that until 8 p.m. in our virtual parking lot to answer any questions anyone might have following the meeting. So we're not doing Q&A during the meeting, but we will have that time afterwards. I know that there are many of you with us tonight who've suffered enormously over the last 5 years from the profound losses due to wildfire. All of us here want to acknowledge your losses and thank you for your strength in coming tonight to collaborate towards finding ways to live with fire in Sonoma County. So we will now hear a brief presentation from your County Supervisor, Linda Hopkins, about wildfire issues and solutions in the 5th District. Welcome, Supervisor Hopkins. You might be muted. There you go.
Thank you so much. It's a smart move when you don't let the politicians talk without being specifically allowed to. So I was trying to get my video started and unmuted, but I was under controls by a greater person than I am. So anyways, I wanted to start off just really quickly with a few key points, which is that some folks might be asking, what is a community wildfire protection plan? And more importantly, why does it matter? Why should I get involved? Well, number one, I feel very strongly that when it comes to wildfire risk reduction, we all need to take responsibility. We need to take responsibility as property owners, as neighbors, as community members, and also as public agencies. A CWPP creates a common vision and a common responsibility that we can all share together. Number two, really importantly, CWPPs actually drive funding. So this plan is going to help us secure state and federal funding. That means that if there is a need in your community, if there is a project that is really going to reduce wildfire risk where you live, and it's part of this plan, it is much more likely to receive funding than a project that is not contained within the CWPP, which is why it's so important for all of you to participate in this process. Number three, the last time that the county formally approved a CWPP was in 2016. And as we know, a heck of a lot has happened since 2016. Namely, we have come to realize that what we thought were the worst case scenarios, we actually have gone beyond those worst case scenarios in many instances. And we have come to realize that wildfire risk is really something that we face down in Sonoma County each and every year. I have a strong sense of urgency around wildfire risk reduction, and I hope that you do too. I live in Forestville, and within the course of 12 months, I was under mandatory evacuation orders twice. If you live like I do in Forestville or in Hacienda or Summer Home Park or Rio Nito or Guerneville, Monterey, Villa Grande, Duncan's Mills, Jenner, Cazadero, Camp Meeker, Occidental, any of these communities, we are quite frankly lucky that these communities are still standing based upon the extreme weather events and the serious wildfire threats that we faced in 2019 and in 2020. This is how we start to take back our communities and really reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire. It's through proactive actions of individual property owners, but also having those actions actually add up to a holistic vision, to a holistic strategy that will actually keep our communities safe. So on a final note of warning, right now it's early May and we are actually facing vegetation moisture levels that are more akin to a midsummer sort of a day. Also, when we think about the amount of water that we currently have, the last water year and our current water year are either number 2 and number 3 or number 2 and number 4, depending on which water gauges you look at, of the most dry years on record. We are very likely in the midst of what is the drought of record for our community, worse even than the drought in the 70s, which is what inspired this community to step up and create Lake Sonoma. So we are facing a very challenging fire year and potentially fire years if we don't get the kind of water that we need next winter. So, I know this is a little bit of a sobering presentation, but I really hope that drives a sense of urgency that we all need to come together to take meaningful steps to reduce our threat of catastrophic wildfire in Sonoma County. And part of that also is learning to live with fire, right? How can we utilize prescriptive and controlled burns? How can we utilize livestock to do the work for us? And then how can we hire and work with crews to help create shaded fuel breaks and structures to reduce wildfire risk throughout our community? And with that, I will hand it back to you, Tracy, and I really look forward to hearing from all of our communities in West County about what the strategies are in your neighborhoods and what the needs and the risks are.
Thank you, Supervisor Hopkins. That was a great introduction, set the stage for why we're all here tonight. I think we can build a lot off of that as we go through the evening. So we're going to start now with our technical presentations. We'll begin with the presentation by Carol Stafford from Permit Sonoma. And if you've been working in fire and especially community wildfire preparedness in Sonoma County, you've likely worked with Carol. Senator Dodd recently introduced her as the best of the best in local wildfire preparedness. She's been leading this effort for decades, including as a principal author of the 2016 CWPP, and she's now spearheading the CWPP update process for the county. Carol will be sharing her expertise tonight regarding community wildfire protection plans, values, risks and hazards, and why they matter in this process, and finally, how homes burn. So please give your attention to Carol now in this pre-recorded video. Thanks.
First, I'd like to talk a little bit about what is a CWPP, or Community Wildfire Protection Plan. The CWPP was defined as part of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of US Congress in 2003. And the idea of it was to improve the capacity to conduct hazardous fuels reduction projects that are aimed at protecting communities, watersheds, and other at-risk lands from catastrophic wildfire, and to enhance protection across the landscape. The motivation for this was the realization from funders like the federal government that there were problems with projects being implemented when one group had come up with an idea to do something without speaking to, for example, the community about it. So they wanted to do a massive fuels reduction project, but the community didn't want to see it done that way. So there would be delays in implementation. And the idea behind this CWPP was to create the forum where everybody could get together and collaboratively discuss ideas for risk reduction in the wildland-urban interface, or WUI, in a collaborative way. And advanced slide, there we go. How does it do that? Brings all the stakeholders in the wildland-urban interface, or WUI, together. Those are community members. Thank you all for showing up. Stakeholders and groups of all sorts. Federal, state, and local agencies, fire agencies, land management agencies, basically everybody who has an interest in reducing risk of catastrophic wildland fire in our communities and wildlands. And together, we are supposed to collaboratively identify wildfire issues and threats, and prioritize the areas and strategies where we can launch projects to reduce that risk. There are 3 minimum requirements for a CWPP only, fairly simple. First, it has to be collaboratively developed with input from everybody. It needs to identify areas for hazardous fuels reduction and recommend types and methods for treatment in those areas. And it needs to recommend measures to reduce the ignitability of structures. This, in 2003, was a fairly new concept. And it was really important that it was included, because the realization that homes are a really important part of wildland ignition potential it is a very important thing to push these ideas forward and get people to understand them. And these concepts need to be included in projects as we move forward. What do we need to make it a success? First, we need all of y'all to keep on collaborating with us as you are tonight. And thank you very much for showing up. There are a ton of players right now in Sonoma County in wildland fire, very different from 2016 when we wrote the first CWPP. We have COPE groups, we have fire safe councils, we have land management agencies, we have all kinds of people who are doing everything they can to reduce risk. And it's becoming increasingly important that we all get together so that we can align our goals, our outcomes, and expectations so that we can create exciting and efficient projects to reduce the risk to all the environments across Sonoma County. There are basically 2 approaches to doing that. There's large fuels management projects, which are forest scale projects aimed at reducing fire intensity in forested areas. They should greatly improve forest health. They're really important. In moderate conditions, can certainly keep fire spread from coming into the communities. And the other thing that we really have to keep thinking about is within community, risk reduction, which includes defensible space and structure hardening. So nearby fuels, 2 homes, defensible space, and all of that stuff. So inside out, from the community out, and from the wildlands in. There are 2 ways of looking at this. Both are important, but the near home stuff is really, really important to remember to consider. This is something that really is a difficult thing for us right now in Sonoma County, is that we have just been hammered. We have just been hammered for the last 5 years. We're traumatized. These fires have been huge. The home loss has been huge. There's been life loss. There's been enormous disruption. And so we're all really very thinking big. We're thinking big fires, big losses, big fear, especially this year with the weather being what it has been. But what I worry about in this is that we're so focused on these huge, very difficult to change issues, like what's going on in the 400,000 acres of forest in Sonoma County, that we're kind of not focusing too much on the small things the size of peas, which are really a lot of the story of why we're losing so many homes in Sonoma County. And so a lot of what I'd like to do today is move us out of thinking about really big things to thinking about smaller things. So one of the first people to start talking about this was Dr. Jack Cohen, who starting in the 1990s, started realizing that there was more to the story of wildland fire than forest, that vulnerabilities on the structure itself and the fuels within 100 feet of those structures, what we know as defensible space, are really the 2 primary things which are going to determine whether or not a home is going to ignite in that wildfire. Clearly, there are other things that go into this discussion, like whether catastrophic weather events like we've been seeing can really change the battlefield. What's the position of the house on the slope? What's nearby? So there's a lot more to it than just these 2 things. But at base, he's absolutely right. If you don't have a raging fire coming within 100 feet of a structure, and the structure is hardened to resist ember ignition, then we've done a lot of what we can do to keep houses from catching on fire. So exactly how do they catch on fire? Well, there's direct flame, which is when there's enough fuel left close to the house that it can catch on fire and the flames hit the house. There's radiant heat, which is when the fuels are so close to the house, if they get burning really hot, the heat alone is enough to ignite elements, vulnerable elements on the home, or break windows or do other things. Typically, radiant heat, smaller cause of home loss in most wildland fires. Not so much the case in tight neighborhoods, which we've been seeing in Sonoma County. But by and large, these 2 issues, radiant heat and direct flame, are pretty much under the control of the homeowner by designing a good and maintaining a good defensible space. But now we all know this. 80% of the home loss in these wildland fires is due to embers, a full 80%, things the size of a pea, right? These can ignite homes by landing in the gutters, which haven't been cleaned, so they're exposing a very vulnerable part of the roof to heat and flame. They can blow in through foundation and attic vents if they're not adequately screened to keep them out. They can pile up in the inside corners. If the leaves pile up there, the embers are going to pile up there. These are all things that we really need to look at, each of us as residents of Sonoma County, to start to doing the things that we can to reduce these risks on our homes. And much of this responsibility is on us as property owners. This is a great simple checklist, which is on firewise.org. You can check that out. Briefly, what is hazard, vulnerability, and risk? What's hazard and what is risk? Wildfire hazard can be explained as the likelihood that a fire is going to happen combined with the intensity of that fire should it happen. We can get to likelihood by looking at fire history and what are the things that are likely to cause fires that are in that area. And Esther and her team are working on this in our modeling. So we'll have pretty good descriptions of the areas where we have high fire start likelihood. Intensity is defined by the fuels in the area. How much fuel is there? What condition is it in? The topography, how steep is it? how many chutes and chimneys that'll send fire flying uphill. Again, this is something else that the GIS team will be looking at in the modeling and come out as part of the wildfire index that they're working on. Vulnerability is exposure plus susceptibility. So what items are exposed by that wildland fire? So exposures would include things like people, life safety, property, homes and stuff, and environmental. What are some of our critical wildland areas that need to be protected? Susceptibility is the likelihood of damage to those homes or ecosystems should the wildfire hit. So we really need to be thinking about where are our highest risks, what are the values that we need to be protecting that are exposed to the wildfire, how susceptible are there, and then we can design projects that will hopefully hit all three.
Thank you, Caroline, for that helpful introduction to CWPPs and how homes burn. Sorry for that little bit of abrupt ending. I'm now going to share some ideas about the range of strategies and priority projects that you can identify and include in the CWPP to prepare Sonoma County for wildfire. So these are some project ideas that might help inspire you later tonight as we identify them. So Esther, could you please bring up my video now?
First,
we used to focus our efforts on the vegetation surrounding our communities. However, after the last several years of wind-driven ember storms, we're changing our focus to one of working from the front door out to the forest. This means we begin with our homes. We need to harden our homes so burning embers don't have a place to land and smolder and then ignite when they're blown against our homes and other structures by intense winds. From there, we can move out to clear the first 5 feet around our homes of anything flammable. In the CWPP, we can identify projects to create and encourage hardened homes and defensible space, both around our homes as well as around other values at risk we identify in our communities. These activities can begin by supporting the most vulnerable members of our communities. Moving further out from our homes, we can look at projects to improve safe evacuation, whether that be communication to ensure everyone knows how to evacuate as early as possible, to projects to removing hazardous fuels along roads that serve as evacuation routes. Next slide. Continuing out from our homes into the WUI or wildland urban interface, we can identify priority areas to create breaks in hazardous fuels, ideally shaded fuel breaks to give firefighters a place to slow down or stop a fire before entering our communities. We can also identify priority locations as well as barriers to overcome to safely and easily introduce prescribed fire into the landscape to reduce hazardous fuels and bring our forests and other ecosystems back into ecological balance. Next slide. Other projects include education and community organizing around all of the above, helping to build capacity for our local fire departments and for our local fire safe councils, and COPE, or citizens organized to prepare for emergencies groups. Finally, we can identify best practices to share information with each other before, during, and after a fire. There are also projects related to ensuring the post-fire recovery process is efficient and simple to navigate. We can suggest changes to local planning, permitting, and zoning, to name a few other ideas. These are only a handful of examples of projects we as residents can do, as well as identify and implement via the Sonoma County CWPP. Tonight, we'll have an opportunity to identify many more projects in our breakout rooms, which I'll explain shortly. So please start thinking about ideas for projects you'd like to include in the CWPP. As I mentioned, as we've learned in recent fires, what you do in and around your home can have the biggest impact on your ability to survive a fire. Carolyn is now going to tell us more about the hardened homes and defensible space strategy for community wildfire preparedness. Carolyn's message is receiving national attention, so I suggest you give her your full attention. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Next, I'd like to speak very briefly about defensible space and structure hardening and what those things are. Defensible space is basically the 100 feet around the house or to the property line where we have reduced fuels in order to reduce the power of an oncoming wildfire. Zone 1 is the area from house walls out to 30 feet. This is what we call the lean, clean, and green zone. You want this as fireproof as possible with no dead and dying plants. We have limbed up stuff, and we're breaking vegetation into clumps so that it can't go straight across the landscape up to the house. This is a great idea of what that might look like. We do still have shrubs and bushes and gardens and stuff, but they're broken up so that if the fire got in here, it couldn't march straight across the landscape up to the house as it could in the pre-treatment condition. We're wanting to remove fuels from near chimneys, backing the fuels away from the homes as much as possible, and just keeping this as lean, clean, and green as we possibly can. Defensible Space Zone 2 is often called the Wildland Fuels Reduction Area. In this area, what we're really after is removing highly flammable vegetation, dead and dying stuff out of there, get rid of the ladder fuels that are under trees that could, if ignited, cause trees to ignite in the canopy. In an ideal world, you may need to do some separation of trees in that area, but getting after those dead and dying on the surface, and ladder fuels, really important, and separate trees and shrubs as you can over time to reduce the power of that oncoming wildfire. Pretty simple premises, pretty complicated talk. This is a 2-hour talk in and of itself, but that's what you're getting for now. One of the most important things I'd like to make sure and say is that defensible space is not moonscape. Plants are allowed, trees are allowed. Nobody's defensible space regulation is telling you to remove all trees. We're just wanting you to reduce the intensity and spacing, increase the spacing between trees and shrubs so that the oncoming wildfire's power is reduced. Now, bonus zone, this is not yet required in Sonoma County. It is in several neighboring counties like Butte, is the zone 0, which is from house walls out 5 feet. And what we'd really like to see in here is nothing combustible. This has become glaringly obvious, the importance of it over the last couple of years as wildfires have taken so many structures in California and in our county. It's those very near structure fuels that are taking the embers and catching on fire, slowly smoldering and transmitting the flame onto the house before or hours or days after the wildfire has passed through. So by removing all flammable items from 5 feet, you will do a lot to help your home survive. So that's plants are allowed if they're very small and well maintained. The thing that I see that most people aren't seeing well is our stuff. We leave tons of stuff in this area and we tend to focus on the plants without thinking about the stuff. So if you're out there looking at your house, really look for flammable items, trash cans, wood piles, all that stuff needs to be well away from the building. Structure hardening, quite simply, is reducing the risks that are part of the construction of the structure so that they're less vulnerable to embers blowing in, as we discussed earlier, or catching on fire from radiant heat and other means. Dr. Steve Quarles, who's an awesome expert in this, came up with 6 priorities, starting at the roof, moving to the vents, covering with 1/8 inch or less, vegetation and defensible space, windows, decks, and siding. In order of priority, these are going to change depending on the site and its structure, but these are the basic things that we want to get after as we're talking about structure hardening. There's some great resources out there right now. This is hot off the presses, this Wildfire Home Retrofit Guide from University of Nevada, Reno. If you Google Home Retrofit Guide and UNR, you can find it, or we're putting all of these links in the chat. Dr. Steve Quarles' research is on the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety website. Firewise has awesome stuff, as does FireSafe Sonoma. County of Sonoma SOCO Adapts program will be adding lots more educational materials as we go over time. So they're all great places to start to learn what you need to know about defensible space and structure hardening.
So I think this is all really especially important information this year. And Supervisor Hopkins really set the stage for us earlier in terms of this is looking to be a really extreme fire year. So the extent you can all take some of these actions now to prepare your defensible space, especially that first 5 feet, it could make a really big difference in your lives and that of your neighbors. I suggest that you click on those links that Kaylin put in the chat so that you can save them onto your computer and look at them later. What we want to do right now is take a moment to actually hear from you about what you're doing already to prepare for fire season. So we've got the poll slide up. Kaylin, could you launch the poll? And you should all now see on your screen a Zoom poll, and this is a multiple choice question. So go ahead and select all the answers that reflect what you've already done or plan to do in the next few weeks to prepare for wildfire. I'm going to read that aloud for those of you who need that. What actions will you take before fire season to prepare your home, family, and or community for fire? 1, retrofit my home to withstand an ember storm. 2, learn about and create effective defensible space. 3, prepare my go bag to evacuate. 4, help organize my neighborhood for evacuation. 5, work with my local fire safe council, COPE, or citizens organized prepare for emergencies or other group to prepare my community. Or 6, if you're doing something else, tell us in the chat. We'd love to hear what you're doing. So take just a few more seconds to see. We've got people are responding. Looks like we're getting a lot of folks are working on defensible space and also retrofitting your homes and preparing your go bags. Awesome, you guys. Really excited to see that. Working in neighborhood evacuation and working in your community groups. And are we getting anything in the chat yet? Please go ahead. And if you have another, do tell us in the chat. And let's see, we've got 70% voted. Give it just another second if anybody else there. We got a couple more. So while those last results are coming in, I'm actually going to read them, what we've got. So 87% of you said that you're learning about creating effective defensible space. That's fantastic. And another 81% are preparing your go bags to evacuate. 60% are retrofitting your homes to withstand an ember storm. 50% are organizing your neighborhoods for evacuation, and 52% are working your community groups. Kaylin, go ahead, you can close it so everybody can see the results. So you can all see that just momentarily. That's great. And again, I think, you know, if there's one thing you leave with tonight, there's a lot you can do. And if you spend the next few weeks just doing a few little things around your house, it could make a big difference. So thank you for being part of the solution. So now I'm going to get that out of the way. I'm going to get, now we're getting to the part of the agenda where we want to hear from you and learn about your concerns and ideas. So first, I'm going to show you where we are in the CWPP engagement process. And remember, you can always email us with your engagement ideas. Kaylin will be putting the project email in the chat. So go ahead to the next slide, Esther. So basically where we are in the process, hopefully many of you attended the kickoff meeting we did back in February. Tonight is our 4th out of 5 public input workshops. And then we'll be talking about tonight, and actually in just a moment, how you can continue to provide input over the summer through the public input map and input survey, and through the county website, all online, and by sending us emails to the Permit Sonoma email, which will be in the chat. We expect to have the public draft of the CWPP available in early 2022. And once that's available, we're going to do another set of public workshops by Supervisorial District like we've done tonight. So next slide, I think, one more slide. So we have a new hub site, and I'm going to show it to you just in a minute. But basically that hub site has a map and public input survey. So I'm going to go ahead, if you could stop screen sharing, Esther, and I will share my screen. There we go. So want to just briefly show you, this is the hub site website. And again, that link should be in the chat. You can click on the link in the chat and it should open it up on your computer. And this is a whole lot of information. This is where you can find information about what we're doing throughout the process over the next 6 to 9 months. There's a community base map. The public input map is what I'm going to be showing you just in a moment. There's this link here with instructions on how to use it. The survey, there's a lot of great resources. There's some really cool story maps and other web-based maps. And then you can see like there's down at the bottom, all the CWPPs at the local level and our timeline and a lot of different resources, who's all participating. And I think we're even, oh, here we go. And here are the summaries of the meeting. So if you want to see what happened at the other meetings. So that's very generally what the hub site is. This is the public input map on the hub site. And this is obviously the area we're going to be working on tonight. If you follow the instructions, you use this smart editor and you can go in and draw on this map if you're comfortable doing that, and it'll open up a little form for you to fill out information. So you can directly add areas that are of important concern to you, projects you think should happen, all that kind of stuff. If you're not so comfortable drawing on the map, then we also have the survey. So you click on the link on the hub site, then click next and put your name, and it'll ask you for where you are and which district. And then you go through a set of questions to give us some more information. And I do want to mention that the hub site actually now does have live Spanish translation. So that's an option. And of course, you can always send us an email to give us your input. So we're going to go into our breakout room next, which will give you an opportunity to share with us through an online platform called Idea Boards, your priority values, risks and hazards, and projects. And the breakout rooms will start with an introduction by your room facilitator into this evening's process. You will then have the opportunity to identify your priority values at risk, wildfire risks and hazards, and potential projects. And if you like, you can start with the information you shared with us when you registered and answered those questions. So this is a virtual process. So we'll be providing you with internet links in your breakout room via the chat. And once you see the link in your breakout chat, you please click on it to open a new browser window on your own computer or device. And that window will be distinct from your Zoom window. From there, you will be able to add your input to tonight's process. And if it works as planned, everyone can be contributing virtually at the same time. If you need help, there will be assistance in every breakout room, and just reach out through the chat. So I'm now going to walk you through how the online process works. I'll share my screen and take you to one of tonight's online whiteboards or idea boards and show you how it works and how to contribute. So let me share my screen again, see if this works. There we go. There we go. So this is called the idea board, and it's basically an online whiteboard, and we're organizing them by the planning division. So this one is showing for the coast. We have 4 different divisions or breakout rooms tonight: the coast, the Southwest Santa Rosa Sebastopol, the Occidental Bodego Camp Meeker area, and what we're calling the Northern Hills area. And for each of these, we're going to be identifying values and assets to protect from wildfire, then wildfire risks and hazards, and then projects to prioritize and implement. And you can view this all 3 together, or we could go into values and assets and just view that. So to simply add an idea, you click on this little green plus sign and it will open up a note, and you type in, this is my idea, and hit return, and that should be it. If somebody puts up an idea that you like, you can click on it and click on the thumbs up, and that adds a vote to it. You click on the X up here to get rid of it, not to get rid of it, to close it. If you made a mistake and want to get rid of it, click on the trash can, but please don't click on the trash can. Otherwise, definitely don't be deleting somebody else's ideas. So we'll do this for values and risks and assets at risk. Then we'll go in and do it for risks and hazards. And then we will go in and talk about projects. And what we've done in some of these is pre-populated the board with projects that have already been identified in one of the local CWPPs. So in this case, for the coast, these are projects from the Sea Ranch CWPP. Let's see, and is there anything else? And so yeah, you can look at one at a time, or you can look at all sections to see what's going on all at once. And we will have time in the breakouts where we're going to talk you through all that as well. If you're not comfortable inputting your ideas directly to the idea board, you can always add your ideas to the breakout room chat, and your facilitator or assistant will add them for you. And remember, you can continue to provide input through August 31st via the map and the survey. And Esther, if you could bring up the next slide, which should show us, let's see, where are my slides? Here we go. Sorry about that, guys. So you can provide input throughout the summer through that website that I mentioned, and the links that Esther put in the chat, Caitlin put in the chat. So meanwhile, we're going to go into the breakout rooms, and we have some ground rules that we'd like you to abide by tonight so we can have an effective and respectful process. The ground rules are that everyone has an equal voice. Please respect others' ideas and opinions. Don't delete others' suggestions, and only vote for one item at any one time. So democracy works when we all play fair. So let's please be respectful tonight in our process. If anyone out there cannot abide by these ground rules tonight, please do let us know in the chat. And with that, let's please go into the next slide. So our breakout rooms are divided by the planning divisions that we created for these workshops based on population centers and ecosystem types. In other words, where vegetation may react differently to fire. So you should have all signed in, registered for one of the breakouts when you registered. So we have these 4 breakout rooms tonight. The Northern Hills, which is Annapolis, Cazadero, Guerneville north of River Road, and the southern area of Lake Sonoma. And then we have the Coastal Division, which is Bodega Bay, Jenner, Stewart's Point, Sea Ranch, and Timber Cove. Next, we have the Southwest Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, and Forestville group breakout room. And then finally, the Occidental, Bodega, Camp Meeker, and Monte Rio group. So you should be automatically sent into a breakout room if you identified that preference in your registration. And if not, please let Amanda know in the chat which room you'd like to join: Northern Hills, Southwest Santa Rosa with Sebastopol, Coast, or Occidental, Bodega, Camp Meeker, and we'll get you into the breakout room as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you how to use the breakout rooms, if this is a new concept for you in Zoom, and where to find the icons. Once you're invited to join a breakout room, please join to enter the room and wait for your room facilitator to begin. You use the breakout rooms icon, those little 4 squares, to change or leave the rooms. And if you need help, please send Caitlin or Amanda a chat message. Next slide. And if you're on a mobile device, the breakout icon is usually on the left side near the top of your screen, as shown in this slide. Now remember, this process could be a little challenging from a mobile device. So if you can, please move to a computer now. So back to the map, next slide. So we're now going to launch the breakout rooms and help everyone get moved into them. You will be automatically moved into your breakout based on the area you identified in your registration. So this map can help you choose if you need to switch rooms using the breakout icon, or if you're not sure where to go. So with that, we'll see you in the breakout rooms. Go ahead, Amanda, and please launch the breakout rooms.
Okay, we're all back now.
Okay, great. So welcome back. Hope you're able to contribute your ideas regarding values, risks, and hazards and projects tonight. Remember, you can continue to contribute your ideas throughout the summer through August 31st via the public input map and survey I explained earlier. And I have lost, where's my chat window? There we go. And you can also send us an email, and we're going to share the links and email with you again shortly. So we are now going to hear a brief summary from each of the breakout rooms. We're going to start with the Northern Hills part of the district. Let me get my list of facilitators up here. And I believe, Hannah, are you going to be sharing with us? And I'm going to share my screen. And Hannah, if it's you, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, thank you. So for the values and assets, one of the biggest things that we talked about was protecting areas of communication. So communication towers, lookouts, and cameras, all infrastructure that provides communication to residents just in general. We also talked about important water facilities and other like old redwood areas of access. those important ecosystems as well. We also talked about keeping fire roads and trails open and accessible, and the need for emergency access and egress from the many neighborhoods that are in this region. And for risks tied to that emergency access is a lot of areas that have one way in, one way out access. And coupled with that, there's a lot of aged construction communities that are in high hazard areas. Also, there are a lot of areas that have houses that are in really close proximity to one another, and that makes it really hard to do defensible space. There can be limited communication at times. And one of the hazards that we identified and ended our conversation with was the idea of hurdles to forest management, from costs to reviewing to CEQA standards and regulations. And finally, some of the projects that we identified to combat these hazards and risks is projects like fuel breaks on ridge lines and doing fuels reduction on evacuation routes. Also the need for radio repeaters to improve that communication, protecting lookouts and ridges. And then finally, we ended with a conversation about defensible space and home hardening, and that there's really a need for funding to help homeowners achieve this. And then also biomass energy production as a way to move towards a new form of energy production for the area.
Thank you, Hannah. So let's now move over to the Southwest Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, Forestville. So that's either Roberta or Carol. Which of you would like to do that? I'll refresh your group here.
Actually, it's Lisa that's gonna.
Oh, Lisa, of course.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa. Thank
Okay, sure. So for the values and assets, did a lot of discussion of cell phone towers, historical areas, evacuation routes, the EOC health centers, different areas of particular historical interest in the town, protecting the fire stations, homes, neighborhoods, gas stations. So those were the values and assets. For risk, there was a lot of talk about Barnett Valley Road and the dense vegetation around it and how to manage sources of fuel for fires like dead trees, dry bushes, etc. How homeowners can do home hardening, or that is a risk that homes aren't hardened and this defensible space isn't implemented. And then eliminating the use of wood chips in landscaping. There's major hazardous fuels, and there's an opportunity through the PG&E grant to implement some of the vegetation management projects that need to happen. And a lot of discussion about Barnett Valley Road. For projects beyond what was identified as CWPP, there was a lot of support for the Map Your Neighborhood. I put that up in the chat, how you can access that, but that seemed to be a really important way to identify what's going on in your area. And then a clear identification of safe green spaces, downtown locations that are safe, fuel reduction work, wildfire risk reduction in education materials to schools, increase awareness of the Map Your Neighborhood, create a shared chipper rental program, and grants and or incentives for homeowners who are doing fuel reduction in defensible space. That could come from private philanthropy or other grant opportunities that may be for the community.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And now we're going to move to the Occidental Bodega, Camp Meeker, Monte Rio, and I believe Barbara is going to lead us through this one.
Yeah, so for values, our breakout room had a really good conversation about this like human element of protecting the lives of people and livestock, as well as communication facilities. And then there was also environmental values like old growth forests. And in general, I think this came up in multiple groups of protecting evacuation routes. And then for risks and hazards, similarly, I think to other groups, we talked about how there are a lot of people who can't do the work themselves, like elders who want to do it, but just they just need help to do that. And then also concerns about the cause of fires. It seems like there's a concern about unhomed individuals who have caused previous fires. And then again, with road access, maintaining those roads clear so that people are able to evacuate. Those are kind of some of our conversations. And then for projects, we identified more of like the communication side of fires and making sure that people know about prescribed fires that are occurring in the area and what to do in that case, as well as just evacuation. There's some confusion about which way to evacuate, especially for homes that are also, there's like one way in, one way out. And then maintaining those fire roads, either through identification of key fire roads or logging roads that are overgrown and need to be maintained for firefighter access. And then just in order to have everybody on the same page of those fires.
Awesome. Thank you. Sounds like you guys have all had great conversations. I'm going to talk briefly about the coast. So we talked a lot about roads being important, and we tied that in with projects, which we'll talk about momentarily. As you can see here, roads, egress and ingress, generally infrastructure, the Odeon Retreat Center and other religious centers, the Fire Protection District, which is an all-volunteer department, Fort Ross School and State Historic Park, and then in general, those hospitals, radio communication, historical, archaeological, and self-service. In terms of risks and hazards, I talked a lot about on the coast, there are a lot of small one-lane roads that limit roads for egress, and that those are an issue. We heard that especially folks on the coast, if they don't have enough gas and if they have to evacuate, that could be a big issue. If a vehicle got stopped along one of those, especially dead and dying trees along the main evacuation routes, and also the Bishop Pines along the Marine Terrace are dead and dying. So that's an increasing new issue on the coast. The Salt Point State Park and the issues there about campfires during fire season and dead pines and stuff. And just in general, the uneducated visitors who come to the coast and they'll drive into the tall grass, or they just don't understand that there actually is a fire hazard on the coast, even though it seems cool and moist. So projects, lots of ideas about projects. A big one is this idea of staging areas for evacuation. And again, there's Highway 1, there are a lot of small roads, but there need to be places where people can be staged and then sent out in groups to evacuate. There's an idea around how to use the CEQA process most effectively in the coastal zone to do projects, to be able to implement projects, remove those dead trees, etc. A lot of talk about the need to protect and harden ridgetop roads. So creating either shaded fuel breaks, or if they're grass top, then mowing, but using roads to really hold fires in that area, especially those ridgetop roads are really key. There were talk of a community local chipper program, and then funding for projects like grazing and canopy breaks. And then we had several projects that came out of the Sea Ranch CWPP, but one of those being one of those roadside fuel breaks, which is a mineral earth break from Annapolis Road to Moonraker, and expansion of the Sea Ranch Fuel Management Plan to include removal of dead and dying trees. I think that ties into that CEQA issue as well. And then getting mountaintop lookouts or alert wildfire cameras. And then there's a lot of talk about what the parks can do. So fire abatement in the parks, opening the access roads in Salt Point, etc. And again, these ridgetop roads, communication about strategic areas, Cruise Ranch Road as an evacuation route, etc. So it's a small group, but I think a really good conversation. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and really appreciate everybody participating in your breakout rooms tonight. Esther, can we have the final slides? And thank you, Barbara, Hannah, and Lisa for doing those breakouts. reporting out on the breakouts. So I want to thank every one of you for taking time out of your busy lives to join us tonight. We know folks are really busy. It seems like this spring, it's especially so. And really glad you're here, given the red flag warnings that we're already getting and what's certainly going to be an interesting fire year this year in California. So please let your friends, family, and colleagues know to join us if they're in the 4th District for the final workshop next week, Wednesday, May 12th. Anybody throughout the county, please provide input throughout the summer through the hub site, through the public input map, through the survey, or through the county email. And Kaylin's going to be posting all of those in the chat for you once again. And I'm going to read the links here to so those who need to hear that. So the CWP website is, and this is the Permit Sonoma's website, is sonomacounty.ca.gov/fire prevention/wildfire-plan. So that's the Permit Sonoma site where you can register for the meetings and such. The hub site, which I showed you earlier, had all the data and information and great resources with the local CWPPs and FireWise and all the links we talked about tonight. Sonoma-county-cwpp-hub-site-sonomacounty.hub.arcgis.com. It's a mouthful, but it will be in the chat, so you can just click on it there and then save it to your computer. And finally, the project email is permitsonoma-wildfire-plan@sonomacounty.org. So thank you for participating. Fire Safe Sonoma is going to be sending out emails to those of you who registered for tonight's meeting about the ongoing process. And as I mentioned, if you'd like to hang out and talk with us in our virtual parking lot, we'll be staying on for another 30 minutes to answer any questions you may have. So thanks for being with us tonight and helping to prepare your homes and your neighborhoods and your communities for wildfire. Good night.